Today we're going to talk just a little bit about Chapter 18 in your book. Chapter 18 deals with fats and the different types of fats that we can consume in our diet. So as far as fat goes, one of the main things I like to say all the time is type of fat is way more important than total fat. So there are good fats and there are bad fats that we consume on a day-to-day basis. So making sure we're consuming the smart fats or the good fats on a daily basis is actually heart healthy and good for us. Whereas the bad fats, on the other hand, not so good. So let's take a look at the different types of fats today. So what is the recommended intake though? Americans need to consume 20 to 35% of their total caloric intake from fat. Now again, trying to make it more smart. So more of the smart fats should make up that 20 to 35%. And also, just another fact is that it's excessive caloric intake in a diet that's high in refined carbs and added sugars that cause weight gain, not necessarily fat intake. So it's consuming too many calories that we're not burning off, eating a lot of processed and refined carbohydrates and added sugars tends to lead more so to that weight gain today. Fats have some very important functions in our body, and one of the big ones, we call it essential fat. We need a certain amount of body fat located around our internal organs, and therefore it's going to cushion and protect those organs, so it's like a shock absorber, but also it provides insulation that can keep us warm. So when we say cold water swimmers, a lot of times they have to, increase their body fat stores because that serves as that insulation layer when they're swimming in that cold water so they can stay warm. So other important functions of fat is that it does increase the palatability. It makes foods taste better when there's fat in it. Also, it can increase the sensation of feeling full. When we look back to our chapter on digestion, we know that fat really is pretty much the last thing to leave the stomach in comparison to carbs and protein. So therefore, a meal that's higher in fat definitely gives us that sensation of feeling full. It's also a component of our cell membrane and our membranes and our sex hormones. So there are some pretty important functions of fat in our diet. So as far as the types of fats, we have what's called triglycerides, which are basically one glycerol with 3 fatty acids. That's what comprises a triglyceride. So they make up about 98% of our fat intake, and most of our body fat stores are triglycerides. Then we have saturated fats, which are the bad fats, unsaturated fats, which are the good, cholesterol, and trans fats, which are also 2 more bad fats. So looking at saturated fats are found in animal products, and they're always going to be solid at room temperature. Okay, so also when we look at the molecular makeup of a saturated fat, they are bound together by single carbon atoms. So remember, there's a single bond between each of those atoms here. So single bond. Whereas when we look at unsaturated fats, they are liquid at room temperature, so they're just the opposite of saturated, and they are actually found in plant products, unlike saturated fats. So we have 2 types of unsaturated fats. You have mono and you have poly. So you can see in monounsaturated fats, there are 1 single bond, and in polyunsaturated fats, there are 2 single bond or double bonds. I'm sorry, there's 1 double bond in mono and 2 double bonds in poly. So as far as the molecular makeup, that's what they look like. But remember, saturated fats come from animal sources, solid at room temperature, and your unsaturated fats come from plant sources and are liquid at room temperature. This is in your textbook, and I love this because it gives us the breakdown of the type of fat in some different food items. And many food items have a mixture of all 3, saturated, mono, and poly. But remember, a good chunk of our fat calories should come from mono and polyunsaturated fat. And the reason being because research is linking unsaturated fats with lower cholesterol levels. So basically stating that it's heart healthy. It's good for your heart to consume mono and polyunsaturated fat. It's bad for your heart to consume saturated fat. So as you can see here, dairy products, a good chunk of the dairy products are mostly saturated. So that's why when we say if you're going to have dairy products, choose low fat or even fat-free versions. That way you're eliminating all of this bad fat. When we look at the oils, it depends on what type of oil you're consuming, but the very best type is olive oil. Olive oil is the one that's the highest in monounsaturated fat, which is the absolute best. The next in line would be your canola oil. So if you're using oils, olive oil is great to, you know, grill or saute and cook with, whereas canola oil is great to bake with. So those are two of the very heart healthy oils. You can see flaxseed oil is another one that's very high in polyunsaturated fat. But basically you want to see more of the orange and even green and less of this, let's see, is it kind of almost a purple color? But obviously coconut oil is not going to be healthy because look at 92% of the calories are saturated fat, which is not heart healthy by any means. But oils in general, lots of them, are going to be more of your smart fats than they are going to be your saturated fat. Meat as well as another one, like your red meats especially, are going to be higher in your saturated fats. But then nuts, that's why we say nuts, oils, and seeds, because nuts and oils and seeds are going to be higher in your mono and your polyunsaturated fat. So these are great sources of, a fat food as well. And not only do they have protein, but they have a lot of fiber in them as well. So choosing more smart fats on a day-to-day basis is great. And just a serving, right? You don't need to eat the whole bag of nuts, but a serving might be a quarter cup, right? So just a handful is a great snack. Also, some other smart fats are your EFAs, essential fatty acids. Okay, and you have two EFAs. You have linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid. So linoleic is in the omega-6 fatty acid family, and alpha-linolenic is in the omega-3 fatty acid family. The characteristics of these smart fats are that they're polyunsaturated. So we know they're smart, okay? They're also used as an energy source. They're stored in our fat tissues, and we do know that they're required in your diet. So here you can see just an example of some of the functions of linoleic acid. It definitely helps to regulate our blood pressure. And if you look in your textbook on, I believe it's the last page of the chapter for chapter 15, it does give you the dietary recommendations for men and women for linoleic and alpha-linolenic acid as well. Where can we find this? Nuts are a great source. Whole grains are also a great source of your linoleic acids. Alpha-linolenic acids, on the other hand, they're also important for nervous system and brain development. Where are we going to find those? You can see in your walnuts, dark green leafies, flaxseed, canola oil are great sources of alpha-linolenic acid. Other important omega-3s or smart fats are your EPAs and DHAs. Again, they really help with inflammatory damage and oxidative reactions, so therefore they can really assist with, blood pressure regulation. It's an anti-inflammatory, basically a heart-healthy type of fat. Also brain and eye formation. So here you can see where are we going to find EPA and DHA in fish and shellfish. So if you eat especially fatty fish at least once a week, there's a good chance that you're getting enough of this. But the adequate intake for adults is around 250 to 500 milligrams a day. So like I said, if you're consuming, say, 8 ounces of fatty fish over the week, you're definitely ingesting enough of these EPA and DHA. And these are important in reducing our risk of heart disease. So that's why we say these are also smart fats. But again, fatty fishes are great sources, but not everybody likes fish. So we can see that fish oils are now added to many foods and animal feeds. Also, we have juices, dairy, and eggs and meat that can all be fortified as well. So they're starting to fortify a lot of our food with EPA and DHA, which is nice. Here just gives you the EPA DHA content of some different fish. So like I said, if you're ingesting fatty fish like salmon, and this is just a 3-ounce serving, you're definitely getting a lot of that. Hydrogenation is bad. Okay, so hydrogenation is a process that adds hydrogen to liquid unsaturated fats, thereby making them saturated. So you're basically taking unsaturated fatty acids and turning them into saturated fats. Why do companies do this? Well, probably the main reason is it's going to extend the shelf life of those processed foods. So they can sit on the shelf for longer periods of time without going bad, and then them having to throw it away and lose money on the product. But hydrogenation actually is very, very negative. And trans fats are one of the key types of fats that go through that hydrogenation process. And research is showing that there's no recommendation for trans fats. You know, we do have recommendations for how much fat you should be ingesting, how much saturated fat, but as far as trans fats, there's really no recommendations. They're saying as little as possible because some research shows that even as little as 2 grams a day of trans fat will hugely skyrocket your risk of developing heart disease. Why is it so bad? Well, it negatively impacts the functions and levels of lipids in our bloodstream. So our LDLs might increase, our triglycerides might increase as far as cholesterol goes. Our risk of heart disease, stroke, sudden death from heart disease, and even diabetes definitely goes up when we ingest more trans fats. It promotes the development of inflammation over time in our body, which we know leads to chronic disease. How much should we eat? Like I said, as little as possible. Where do you find trans fats on your food label? If you look under total fat, right here. Okay, right here it says 0. But if you look further under the list of ingredients, if you see the words partially hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils or hydrogenated oils, those are all key words that say, okay, there are trans fats in it. Now, as far as food labeling, if we look back at that food labeling chapter for chapter 4, even though it might say 0 grams of trans fat, there still could be a half a gram of trans fat in it, but they don't have to state that. Okay, so food labeling guidelines say you can still have a half a gram, but if you have less than a half a gram, you can put 0 beside trans fat. So if you look at the list of ingredients and you see hydrogenated oils, yet this says 0, just note to yourself that there still could be up to a half a gram of trans fats per serving. And if we look back to here, what is the recommendation? Eat as little as possible. So even a half a gram can mean a lot. Foods are labeled trans fat free, but again, make sure you're looking at the list of ingredients. Look for those keywords, hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. Where are you going to find your trans fats? A lot of your baked goods, right? Pies, pastries, packaged snack foods are a big one, frozen pizzas, margarines, you know, those are high sources of trans fats in diets and fast foods too. Lastly, let's talk just a second about cholesterol. Now, I'm talking about cholesterol through food. So we produce 75% of what our body needs. So our liver is actually producing it, and our brain produces 75% of what your body needs a day for cholesterol. So we only need about 25% coming from our diet. So why is cholesterol so important to consume a certain amount on a daily basis through foods? Well, because it's a building block for our sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, vitamin D. It's a component of our nerves and our brain and our cell membrane, bile, so it does have some key functions. Now, certain foods have a lot of cholesterol in it and certain foods do not. So obviously animal products are going to be the ones that are going to be higher in cholesterol. So like the red meats, for example, are higher than, you know, the poultry and the fish, for example. Even eggs. So one egg yolk, that's the yellow part contains 186 milligrams of cholesterol. Okay, so you know these tables just break down the cholesterol content of certain foods that we eat. What is the recommendation? Well, the AHA, the American Heart Association, says no more than 300 milligrams a day. So going back here, if you're eating eggs, multiple eggs every day, you're definitely going to get way more than that recommendation. So just be cautious because too much cholesterol ingestion through food can in turn lead to higher serum blood cholesterol levels. So our triglycerides might increase, our LDLs might increase, In addition to that, it can lead to weight gain, it can lead to atherosclerosis of our arteries. So, paying attention to that guideline. And heart healthy diets, people who are on heart healthy diets, most doctors will recommend no more than 200 milligrams a day. So, those are the general recommendations for your cholesterol intake strictly through foods.